somebody who was biologically born a woman. An outbreak of common sense from our judiciary, and something I think nearly the whole population will agree with.
Reeves attacked Farage. Rachel Reeves can't get enough of Nigel Farage in latest speech. Rachel Reeves couldn't stop talking about Nigel Farage during her recent speech, much to the surprise of many observers. In what seemed like a recurring theme, Reeves repeatedly referenced the former UKIP leader, drawing attention away from her core message on public services and economic plans. Despite this, she made clear her commitment to a strong NHS, distancing herself sharply from the Reform Party's calls for an insurance-based health system. "We believe in a publicly funded national health service, free at the point of use," she declared firmly. Reeves took a pointed jab at the Reform Party's member for Clacton, suggesting that rather than spending time in the Westminster pubs, the member should focus more on the priorities of the British people. "Perhaps the two-chairman pub might be a better fit," she quipped, referring to the traditional pub layout, drawing laughter from the chamber. She criticised the party for its lack of seriousness, noting that despite being in Parliament for less than a year, they had already accumulated £80 billion of unfunded commitments. "They are simply not serious," she insisted. Turning to the Chancellor, Reeves described her as an open book, but warned that she played roulette with the economy and advised against her trying poker anytime soon. The repeated mention of reform, and particularly the member for Clacton, outnumbered references to Scotland in Reeves' speech, which some MPs called a disgrace. When challenged on funding, Reeves finally mentioned the SNP, albeit without attaching specific figures for the support of groups like Acorn. "What funding is she going to allocate for Acorn?" asked one MP, pointing to a lack of concrete commitments. Reeves responded by noting her questions about the SNP's failure to back defence investment in Scotland and raised concerns about rising hospital waiting times under their leadership. She pointed out that the SNP had let down the people of Scotland by allowing critical health services to deteriorate. The debate highlighted deep frustrations over health and defence spending, as well as a broader clash of political priorities. Reeves' repeated focus on Farage and the Reform Party drew criticism for diverting attention from pressing economic and social issues, but she maintained that her party stood firmly for a strong, publicly funded NHS and responsible fiscal management. The session ended with clear divisions but an unmistakable call for accountability from all sides. Rachel Reeves continued to press her points throughout the debate, emphasising the need for investment in public services and defending the government's approach against accusations of fiscal irresponsibility. Despite repeated interruptions and attempts by opposition members to redirect the conversation, Reeves remained focused on her key messages: protecting the NHS, supporting workers, and tackling economic challenges with practical solutions. Her repeated references to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, however, did not go unnoticed. Several MPs from across the aisle expressed frustration that Reeves seemed fixated on the former UKIP leader, accusing her of using his name as a political distraction rather than addressing the substantial issues facing the country. Some argued that by constantly mentioning Farage, she was avoiding deeper scrutiny on her own party's record and policy details. Nevertheless, Reeves argued that the influence of Farage and similar figures on the political landscape could not be ignored. She suggested that their rhetoric threatened social cohesion and undermined confidence in public institutions. By highlighting the contrast between her party's commitment to a publicly funded NHS and the Reform Party's calls for privatisation, she sought to draw a clear line in the debate over the future of Britain's healthcare system. Reeves also addressed concerns about Scotland, acknowledging that healthcare and defence funding were critical issues for the nation. She criticised the Scottish National Party for what she described as failures to properly invest in hospitals and military infrastructure, calling on the SNP to do more to support the people of Scotland. This part of her speech aimed to appeal to MPs worried about regional disparities and to counterbalance her earlier focus on Farage and the Reform Party. Throughout the discussion, the tension between delivering fiscal responsibility and meeting the demands of a stretched public sector remained evident. Reeves insisted that while her party was committed to maintaining a strong NHS, the reality of economic pressures meant tough choices had to be made. She stressed that transparent funding commitments and careful management were essential to ensuring long-term sustainability. As the debate drew to a close, it was clear that Rachel Reeves' speech had sparked both support and controversy. Her emphasis on a publicly funded NHS resonated with many, but her frequent mentions of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party sparked criticism that she was diverting attention from pressing economic questions. The session underscored the challenges facing the government as it balances political strategy with the urgent needs of the nation. With public services under strain and political divisions deepening, the path ahead remains uncertain and fiercely contested. Rachel Reeves' recent speech in Parliament quickly became the subject of considerable attention and debate, not so much for the core policy ideas she advanced but rather for her surprising and persistent focus on Nigel Farage, the former leader of UKIP. Observers and MPs alike were struck by how often Reeves brought up Farage's name, making it something of a refrain throughout her remarks. This repeated invocation of Farage, intertwined with pointed critiques of the Reform Party, appeared to overshadow her main messages about public services, fiscal responsibility, and the future direction of the UK economy. Reeves, who holds the position of Shadow Chancellor, is widely recognised for her policy expertise and her commitment to social welfare priorities, especially the National Health Service, NHS. Yet during this particular speech, instead of solely honing in on pressing domestic economic challenges or laying out clear plans for public sector investment, she seemed almost preoccupied with the political ramifications and disruptive influence associated with figures like Nigel Farage. While some critics viewed this as a strategic misstep that detracted from more urgent matters, others interpreted it as a deliberate attempt to draw contrasts between her party's vision and the rising tide of populist and right-wing politics embodied by Farage and the Reform Party. Central to Reeves' speech was an emphatic defense of the NHS as a publicly funded institution, one that must remain free at the point of use, a cornerstone principle she insisted distinguished her party from the Reform Party's apparent embrace of an insurance-based healthcare model. She stated with conviction, "We believe in a publicly funded national health service, free at the point of use." When pressed on specific funding commitments, Reeves did finally mention the Scottish National Party, SNP, and groups like Acorn. However, her comments lacked the specificity that some MPs were demanding, as she did not attach concrete figures to the financial support for such groups. What funding is she going to allocate for Acorn? One MP challenged, underscoring a wider frustration with the apparent vagueness of the government's spending plans. Reeves responded by drawing attention back to the SNP's perceived failures, particularly in regard to defence investment in Scotland and escalating hospital waiting times. She accused the SNP of letting down the people of Scotland by allowing vital health services to deteriorate, a critique aimed at stirring debate over regional disparities and highlighting governance shortcomings north of the border. The broader debate revealed deep fissures over the government's approach to health and defence spending, and more generally, over the political priorities that each party espouses. While Reeves' repeated focus on Farage and the Reform Party drew sharp rebuke from some quarters for diverting attention away from pressing economic and social questions, she maintained that her party was standing firm in its commitment to a strong, publicly funded NHS and responsible fiscal management. The session ended with clear divisions among MPs, but a unanimous call for greater accountability and clarity from all sides. As the debate unfolded, Rachel Reeves remained resolute in pressing her points, repeatedly emphasizing the necessity of investing in public services. She defended her party's policies and the government's fiscal stance against accusations of irresponsibility, rejecting suggestions that their approach was reckless or unworkable. Despite persistent interruptions and attempts from opposition members to steer the conversation elsewhere, Reeves kept returning to her core messages, safeguarding the NHS, supporting workers, and addressing economic challenges through pragmatic solutions rather than ideological posturing. Her frequent references to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party did not go unnoticed, however. MPs from across the political spectrum voiced their frustrations that Reeves seemed overly fixated on the former UKIP leader. Some accused her of using Farage's name as a political smokescreen to deflect attention from the shortcomings and ambiguities in her own party's policy proposals. By continually bringing up Farage, they argued, Reeves was avoiding deeper scrutiny of her own government's record and the details of its economic agenda. Nevertheless, Reeves countered these criticisms by arguing that the influence of Farage and figures like him on the political landscape was significant and could not be overlooked. She suggested that their divisive rhetoric threatened social cohesion and undermined public trust in key institutions. By juxtaposing her party's staunch support for a publicly funded NHS with the Reform Party's advocacy of privatisation and insurance-based healthcare models, she sought to draw a clear ideological line in the sand over the future of Britain's healthcare system. To Reeves, this was not just a political contest but a fundamental battle over values and social justice. In addressing concerns about Scotland, Reeves acknowledged that health and defence funding were critical issues demanding urgent attention. She criticised the SNP for what she saw as their failure to properly invest in hospitals and military infrastructure, appealing to MPs worried about regional inequalities and the health of national defence capabilities. This critique was not merely symbolic but aimed at challenging the SNP's governance record and drawing attention to areas where Reeves believed the party had fallen short. Throughout the discussion, the tension between the imperative to deliver fiscal responsibility and the pressing demands of an overstretched public sector was palpable. Reeves insisted that while her party remained committed to maintaining a strong NHS, economic realities required difficult choices and tough prioritization. She emphasized the importance of transparent funding commitments and careful financial management as the keys to ensuring the long-term sustainability of public services and the broader economy. As the debate drew to a close, it was evident that Rachel Reeves' speech had sparked both support and controversy. Her firm stance on a publicly funded NHS resonated strongly with many MPs and members of the public, but her relentless focus on Nigel Farage and the Reform Party drew criticism for distracting from the more substantive economic and social issues facing the country. The session underscored the difficult balancing act facing the government as it tries to navigate political strategy amid urgent national challenges. Public services remain under significant strain, and political divisions deepen, making the path forward uncertain and highly contested. The conversation also illuminated the broader context of contemporary British politics. The rise of populist and fringe parties like the Reform Party, along with the continued influence of figures such as Nigel Farage, has disrupted traditional political alignments and forced mainstream parties to recalibrate their messaging and priorities. Reeves' repeated references to Farage can be seen as part of this wider struggle to contend with new political forces that challenge established norms and policy frameworks. Simultaneously, the debate highlighted enduring tensions over the future of the NHS, an institution deeply cherished by the British public. The question of whether to preserve the NHS as a universal, publicly funded service or to introduce elements of privatisation and insurance-based models remains one of the most contentious issues in UK politics. Reeves' unequivocal support for the former reflects her party's desire to reaffirm the NHS as a cornerstone of social policy and a marker of national identity. The criticisms Reeves levied against the SNP also speak to ongoing regional dynamics within the UK, where issues of funding, governance, and political leadership continue to provoke heated discussions. The question of how to ensure equitable investment in Scotland, especially in areas like healthcare and defence, remains a key challenge for the UK government and opposition alike. Reeves' pointed remarks about the SNP's performance reflect broader debates over the future of the Union and the responsibilities of devolved governments. Reeves' approach to the Chancellor and her characterisation of economic policy as playing roulette with the economy convey a wider scepticism about the government's fiscal discipline. Many MPs share concerns about rising debt levels, inflation, and the impact of global economic uncertainty on Britain's financial stability. Reeves' cautionary tone underscores the need for prudent economic management, balancing investment in public services with the imperative to maintain confidence among businesses and investors. In the weeks and months ahead, it is likely that the themes raised during this debate will continue to dominate political discourse. The question of how to fund and reform public services, especially the NHS, will remain central to electoral politics and policy development. Her defence of the NHS as a publicly funded national health service, free at the point of use, is not merely a policy position but a reaffirmation of Labour's identity and core values. The NHS is often described as the closest thing Britain has to a national religion, a unifying institution that transcends political divides and embodies the principles of equity and collective responsibility. Reeves' stark rejection of the Reform Party's insurance-based healthcare proposals thus served to draw a sharp ideological boundary between Labour's vision of Britain and that of its political rivals. This emphasis on healthcare also highlights a critical fault line in British politics. The question of how to fund and organise the NHS touches on broader issues of economic policy, taxation, and social welfare. For Reeves and Labour, preserving the NHS in its current form requires a commitment to public investment and fiscal responsibility, balanced against the realities of a constrained economic environment. She acknowledged that maintaining a strong NHS in the face of budgetary pressures would necessitate difficult choices, but insisted that these choices must be guided by fairness and transparency rather than ideological dogma or political expediency. Reeves' critique of the Reform Party's unfunded commitments, £80 billion worth in less than a year, served as a stark warning about the dangers of reckless fiscal promises. Her jibe about the member for Clacton spending too much time in pubs was a colourful way of questioning the seriousness and readiness of these new political actors to govern effectively. It was a reminder that political parties must be accountable for the financial consequences of their policies and that populist promises, while often appealing, carry real economic risks. When she shifted her focus to Scotland, Reeves tapped into a particularly sensitive and significant political issue. The SNP's stewardship of Scotland's public services, especially the NHS and defence infrastructure, has been a subject of intense scrutiny and debate. Reeves accused the SNP of failing the people of Scotland, particularly on health outcomes like hospital waiting times, and of neglecting critical defence investments. These critiques resonated with many MPs who are concerned about regional inequalities and the future of the UK's constitutional arrangement. By raising these issues, Reeves sought to appeal to voters beyond England, positioning Labour as a party capable of addressing the needs of all parts of the UK. Her pointed remarks on Scotland also reflect the complicated relationship between Labour and the SNP, which has evolved dramatically in recent years. The SNP's dominance in Scottish politics has significantly weakened Labour's traditional base, and Reeves' speech was an attempt to reclaim ground by highlighting what she framed as governance failures north of the border. This tactic aligns with Labour's broader strategy to present itself as the party of unity and effective governance in a time of increasing constitutional uncertainty. The economic themes woven throughout Reeves' speech underscore the challenges faced by any government navigating the post-pandemic recovery, inflationary pressures, and geopolitical uncertainties. By describing the Chancellor as playing roulette with the economy, Reeves voiced concerns shared by many economists and policymakers about the potential risks of expansive fiscal policies without clear and credible funding sources. Her metaphor highlighted the precariousness of the current economic situation, where decisions have outsized impacts on interest rates, inflation, and the cost of living for ordinary people. Reeves' insistence on transparency and fiscal responsibility reflected a desire to restore confidence among investors, businesses, and the public. She argued that responsible management of the public finances was essential not only for economic stability but also for preserving the government's ability to invest in crucial public services like the NHS. This balancing act, between investing in public goods and maintaining fiscal discipline, is at the heart of much contemporary political debate and will continue to be a defining challenge for policymakers. The response from opposition MPs, who criticised Reeves for her frequent references to Farage, illustrates the political risks inherent in her approach. Some saw her focus on Farage as a distraction, an attempt to deflect attention from Labour's own policy details and past performance. This tension between addressing external political threats and presenting a coherent policy agenda is a dilemma faced by many parties in an era of fragmented politics and intense media scrutiny. Yet Reeves' argument that figures like Farage and the Reform Party represent a real and present challenge to social cohesion and democratic norms has merit. The rise of populist rhetoric has undeniably reshaped political debate in the UK and many other countries, introducing new fault lines and amplifying divisions. For Labour, confronting this phenomenon while articulating a positive and inclusive vision for the future is a critical task. Her speech also highlighted the continuing importance of health and defence spending in British politics. With NHS waiting times at record highs and ongoing debates about the adequacy of defence budgets in the face of global threats, these issues resonate deeply with the electorate. Reeves' critiques of the SNP on these fronts reflect broader concerns about the capacity of devolved governments to deliver services effectively and the need for coordinated national strategies. Looking ahead, the dynamics exposed in this debate are likely to shape political discourse well into the future. The contest over the NHS, public spending, and the role of government will remain central themes in upcoming elections and policy discussions. Meanwhile, the challenge posed by populist movements and the need to address regional disparities and constitutional questions will continue to test political leaders. Rachel Reeves' speech, with its mix of policy advocacy, political critique, and strategic positioning, encapsulates the complexity of contemporary UK politics. It reveals a party grappling with external threats, internal priorities, and the demands of governance in an uncertain world. How Reeves and her party navigate these challenges will have significant implications not only for their political fortunes but also for the future direction of the country. Ultimately, this speech serves as a reminder that politics is as much about narrative and symbolism as it is about policy specifics. Reeves' repeated references to Nigel Farage symbolized an attempt to frame the political battleground in terms that resonate with voters concerned about division, change, and continuity. Her defense of the NHS and critique of fiscal imprudence articulated a vision of responsible stewardship and social justice that aims to connect with everyday concerns.